Welcome to the overview of the 10 building blocks of Chinuch. These building blocks, essentially, I call them 10 building blocks of Chinuch. They essentially cover all the areas that we need as mechanchim, teachers, educators, to cover for our children. It's not the actual curriculum per se, it's more like a framework. Building block number 2 is the Taryag Mitzvot, and building block number 3 is the story outline of Chumash. What I mean by the story outline? So the Oraisa, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's perfect Torah, given through Moshe Rabbeinu, Torah Hashem Tamima, this perfect Torah, really, in its most skeletal definition, is made up of 2 components. You got Taryag Mitzvahs and you got a storyline. So let's look at these very briefly. The storyline, creation of the universe, 10 generations from Adam till Noach, the Mabul. 10 generations from Noach till Avram. The life of Ram, the life of Yitzhak, the life of Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, the Avos, the Imahos, and then you've got Yosef, the Shiftei Kar. 12 tribes. Yosef is sold to Mitzrayim. 12 tribes, the 10 brothers go down to search for him. Eventually 11 with Binyamin reunite, and then they end up in Shibud Mitzrayim, the slavery in Egypt for a couple hundred years. Finally, the Makos, Yetziat Mitzrayim, Matan Torah, and then 40 years in the Midbar, end of storyline. Bris Ha'olam, till entering the land under Yeshua, that's a storyline. It covers 2,488 years. Contained in the storyline, that's a very skeletal definition of the storyline, but contained in the storyline are Taryag Mitzvot, 613 instructions. I'm avoiding the word commandment, even though it's not a bad translation, but the word instruction really is more reflective of the intent in the word sivui. So, out of the 613 mitzvahs and your storyline, everything a child is ever going to learn, for the most part, vast majority, must find its source in one of these 2. And these 2 are quite clearly delineated in the sense that the Taryag Mitzvahs are the starting point, the platform, the shoresh, the root for everything that's legal in the Torah. So when Rabbeinu HaKadosh decided on Hayra Ashah, it was an emergency measure to write down the Torah Sheba'al Peh that was never meant to have been written. He did it in such a way that it was extremely organized. Basically, you've got 6 sections of the Mishnah, Shisha Sidarim. Seder means arrangement, organized. It's categorized. Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, and under the 6 sections, you've got 63 Masechtas, 63 tractates, 63 volumes, and each one has a different name because it covers a different part of Taryag Mitzvahs. With the exception of a few, almost all of them are really commentary to Taryag Mitzvahs. Every single Masechta, each tractate of the Mishnah is then broken down into named and numbered chapters, and each chapter is then broken down into numbered paragraphs, each one known as a Mishnah. The Mishnayos is essentially the commentary to Taryag Mitzvahs. So if you know Taryag Mitzvahs, you actually have the outline for all Mishnayos. And when you're learning Mishnayos, you're learning more details of each of the Taryag Mitzvahs. So Masechta Brachas covers Kriyat Shema. And then, it covers Tefillah. And then it covers brachas, mainly concerned with Birkas Hamazon, which is the De'oraisa Dika mitzvah of brachas. And then you've got other types of brachas, which are all Rabbanan, but that's already an offshoot. So you see in the Masechta which mitzvahs of Taryag Mitzvahs it's dealing with. Peah, you've got a lot going in Peah. You've got Leket and Shikra. You got Hilchot Tzedakah as well, laws of charity. So all these are De'oraisas, which the Mishnah is starting to give you the details of. Whatever the child's going to learn in Mishnayos is essentially a peirush to Taryag Mitzvahs. It's beefing out the details in Taryag Mitzvahs. What the child will learn in Gemara is really a peirush to the Mishnayos, which is a peirush to Taryag Mitzvahs. Whatever a child is going to learn in Halacha, Halacha are the legal conclusions of the Gemara's discussion of its peirush to the Mishnayos, which is really a peirush to Taryag Mitzvahs. See, it really comes out like this. Anything a child is going to learn on the legal side of the Torah has to find its source somewhere in Taryag Mitzvot. Anything a child is going to learn on the non-legal side of the Torah, for the most part, must find its source somewhere in the storyline. So, for example, Medrash is a commentary to the storyline. Agadata, even Hashkafa, certainly Midas. Much of the time you learn from like Pelayos or Orchat Tzadikim, and they're going to go through many different Midas, different character traits, and the first thing they're going to do is show you psukim, verses which this character trait is based upon, from Tanakh. Which part of Tanakh? Much of it will be the storyline. I'm speaking in general, but this is, for the most part, it's really accurate. There are some exceptions. You're going to get some certain mitzvahs which are described in one of the Taryag Mitzvahs, because one of the Taryag Mitzvahs is dealing with a specific mitzvah. But otherwise, this is generally correct, that anything on the legal side is in Taryag Mitzvahs, anything on the non-legal side must find its source somewhere in the storyline. So Hashkafa, Musa, Chasidus, Medrash, Agadata, all these areas will find their source somewhere in the storyline. So based on this, what we're really saying is, what would happen if you can deliver, and you're going to see examples very soon, of a map of Taryag Mitzvahs, a filing system of Taryag Mitzvahs, a map and a filing system for the Chumash and later Nach, into the mind of a child. The child will have at his fingertips the headlines of all the files of Taryag Mitzvahs, all the files of all the chapters of Chumash, which means that when they're learning the details of Taryag Mitzvahs, their brain already has a file for where the detail will go. So in a certain sense, I offer the mashal, a very simple metaphor of a very messy office. Well, there's two types of messy offices. You can have one which is so messy that to find anything takes forever. Then you have another office where, in reality, there are files, filing cabinets, there are shelves, there are cubby holes, there's a lot of drawers and cabinets where you have a place for everything. And even if right now it's a mess, I would call that kind of like a busy mess, because you can pick up this piece of paper, and you know exactly which file, which shelf it belongs in. Oh, and within 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever, you can put everything in its place because there's somewhere for it all to go. So you can't really compare one to the other. One is a mess and there's no order, no organization, no categorization, and there you're more likely to lose things. The brain is not a whole lot different. If we don't have categories, organized information that goes in a specific place in the mind, it's much harder to retain information that we learn and to recall it later on. Masha Einken, which is not the case if a mind is organized. This is actually brought by the Ramchal, no less, Rav Moshe Chaim Lutzato, in his Hagdama, his introduction to his famous work, Derech Hashem, where he compares, you could have two Talmidei Chachamim who have exactly the same amount of information and perfect mastery of both. However, the difference between the two is that one person knows all the details, whereas the second Talmid Chacham not only knows the details, but also understands the perimeters, the context where all those details belong, and understands how to categorize them because he has organized them. So says the Ramchal, you cannot compare the first one to the second one. The second one has so much a superior knowledge because he not only knows all the details, he understands the relationship of how each detail interfaces with other details. So it's all part. Each part is part of one big picture. So in that sense, what we are offering is that if we can teach Taryag Mitzvahs and the storyline in incremental levels of detail, starting with headlines and then a little bit more detail, more detail, more detail, more detail, then what ends up happening is that you are delivering in the mind of a child a filing system so that whatever he's ever going to learn on the legal or non-legal side of the Torah, his brain has somewhere for it to go. Number two of this is not only does his brain have somewhere for it to go, but he's going to have much more interest and natural curiosity to add on to something he already has a familiarity with. Masha Einken, which is not the case, unfortunately, and you can ask yourselves this question. For example, when children first learn Mishnayos, a good 50% plus of energy, time, that the Rabbi has to put into the class is spent, and just tell me if this is your experience, 20, 30, 40, 50 plus % of the time has to be invested in explaining the background information that the Mishnah assumes. And this becomes very problematic because some kids start to lose it after a while. They just can't focus on so many details and try and understand how they all fit together. So what happens if a child already knows Taryag Mitzvot? He already knows the storyline. Then whatever you're going to teach him, his mind already knows where it belongs. So he'll know different categories of tumah, different categories of zeraim, of agriculture. Oh, he knows there's truma gedayla, truma smaisa. Oh, and he knows what things a kohen is not allowed to eat until he's tahor. Oh, because he became tamei from a particular type of sheretz or emission. Oh, and therefore he has to go to the mikveh at sundown. And these are not isolated details because he's familiar with tumah, he's familiar with tara, he's familiar with which animals are matame, what type of cases a person become tamei on their own, and what type of foods they're forbidden to eat. Oh, it's kodshim, specifically truma in this particular case for a kohen. Instead of having to learn isolated pieces of information, trying to figure it all out together, his brain already has categories for each of these. And when he's learning new details, the details have somewhere to go, and he's enjoying, he's turned on, he's stimulated, he wants to know more information to add on to a category that he already has in his brain. So these are what I'm calling 3 foundational skills. Give a child the ability to understand language, give him Taryag Mitzvot and the storyline. You have given him an opening and an interest in the entire Chumash and Nach, and all in preparation for Mishnayos and later on Gemara, which is almost completely analysis, constantly comparing, constantly contrasting, constantly asking questions, constantly bring up a problem, constantly looking for a solution to a problem and often finding a problem with the solution. And that's all analysis, paying attention to detail. And the Gemara inevitably will always find you, will always ask you, where's the source for this? Sometimes it'll tell you it's a brisa, or sometimes it'll tell you, oh, it's a Mishnah, or and even then they'll want to know, okay, but what's the Mishnah's source? Oh, it's this pasuk here. So it really all starts to come together once you're delivering these 3.